Hi, and welcome to Coaching Voices podcast. I'm Pravin Sharma, an executive and leadership coach and consultant with over 2 decades of experience in the industry. I truly believe in the transformative power of coaching and the profound impact it can have on people's lives. In each episode, we dive into candid conversations with seasoned coaches, exploring what coaching really is and whether it's the right path for you. Together, we uncover how you can unlock your full potential and step confidently into leadership roles within your organization. For this episode of Coaching Voices, we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Christine Powell, an esteemed educator and a researcher specializing in executive functioning and support for individuals with ADHD and other learning challenges. With over 2 decades of experience in special education, Dr. Powell has dedicated her career to advance academic success for students with diverse learning profiles. Her expertise is built on a strong academic foundation, including a Bachelor of Science in Sports Medicine, a Master's in Special Education, and a Doctorate in Education from California Lutheran University. She's also a Fulbright Distinguished Award in Teaching Scholar, having conducted significant research in Singapore on executive functioning strategies. It's my honor to welcome Dr. Christine Powell to our show. Hello, Dr. Christine. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing well. And you?
I'm doing excellent. Let's start off with talking about your background, your journey into the coaching. How did you get started?
Sure. My background is in education. And, well, it didn't start that way. Initially, I started with my bachelor's in sports medicine, very interested in neurobiology and the coordination between the mind and the body. I went back to school and got a master's degree in education, special education specifically, and then went on to get my doctorate and further education. But I was fascinated with how individuals learn and take in information and the lived experience of individuals who are neurodiverse, specifically with ADHD. So it was from a very early onset that I developed a real passion for understanding individuals that learn differently. And one of the reasons is because when I got my master's degree in special ed, my son had been recently diagnosed with ADHD. And that kind of took me on a different path.
You mentioned about the special education. Is that particular education is related to the ADHD?
Individuals that are in school can be identified as early as 5 years old as having neurotypical behaviors. Sometimes they're seen as motor-driven, lack of focus and concentration, inability to sit for extended periods of time. So they're identified in a learning community as not fitting the norms. So it doesn't mean they're intellectually deficient necessarily. It doesn't mean that they can't learn. It just learns that possibly their learning environment needs to look different for them to maximize their learning outcomes. So they may be funneled into special education programs or have accommodations that suit their needs to level the playing field.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Also, you talk about the executive dysfunction. What is that executive dysfunction?
Well, that became an area of great interest to me because my son was having challenges. And being a special educator already and having, the degrees and licenses, having a child then diagnosed with ADHD, I thought I could handle this problem. And I was looking at parents and saying, you have a child, you have the degrees, you have the expertise. What do we do? And through trial and error and research and going back to school, and also teaching individuals with ADHD within the school community, I realized that oftentimes the strategies for one child don't necessarily work for, everybody. And they have to be very individualized. So just to preface, ADHD is a long-term neurodivergent thinking pattern. It means your brain is wired differently. And what's so interesting is these individuals, obviously children grow up to be adults, their brain chemistry doesn't change. They just learn strategies and behaviors to help them manage and cope.
What are some of the most common executive functioning challenges faced by your students?
So specifically, I work with individuals that have executive functioning disorders. And if you have ADHD, you have some type of executive functioning disorders. And the executive functioning are what happens in the frontal lobe of our brain, the cerebral cortex. And that is where we work with planning, organization, goal setting, focus, decision making, problem solving. And you would think that, these things we just learn them along life's path, but that's not necessarily true. We can be taught these, different functions and skills. Typically, they're learned at the home or in school, but sometimes with this fractured thinking of an individual that has ADHD, they may not be paying attention in that moment, or they may be working around the room and not understanding what's going on. So they're challenged. We don't develop fully these executive functions in our frontal lobe of our brain until we're approximately 26 years of age. So if you look at insurance is very high for teenage drivers, based mostly on their executive functioning skills aren't fully developed, meaning they're not great problem solvers and they're maybe a little bit unfocused on the road, or maybe not able to make decisions in an instant. So insurance is higher until they get older, where then it drops down because then their brain is developing and they're able to take on life's challenges, hopefully.
How do you approach executive functioning coaching? What are the strategies or techniques that have proven most effective in helping students?
Well, every individual is different, and just like a fingerprint is so different. Right. So it's meeting students and individuals where they're at. So I initially started with seeing just students for ADHD and executive functioning challenges. And as I got to work with students, I started to meet their parents. And I don't know if you know this or not, but there is a genetic link between ADHD and executive dysfunction and families. So oftentimes I'll see a student and then meet the parents and be like, the parents will say, yeah, I was diagnosed with ADHD, or I think I have ADHD as well. I'm disorganized. I lack focus. I get bored very easily. I don't like routine. And we're seeing those same things in the children. So over time, as I told you before, executive functioning can be taught. But if you have a parent that, has lack of executive functioning, those are the role models that these students and children are having. So as a coach, an ADHD coach and executive functioning coach, I step in and I help the families. Oftentimes I work with the students to develop strategies. Say, for instance, if organization is a challenge and the schools are not providing specific organization strategies, I drill down on what is currently working and what is not working. And typically knowing both of them, it's important to know what is currently working and what strategies you've tried that are just not helpful. And that lends itself to parents as well. Parents then come back and say, wait a minute, my son is now or daughter's now using a calendar. They're online, they're digital, they're keeping track of time. They're doing it better than myself. Can you help me? Okay, let's drill down on what specific challenges you're having. So to answer your question, it's very individualized. I meet with clients one-on-one. So I use a behavioral therapy approach. That's cognitive behavioral therapy, which I don't know if you've heard CBT, or dialectical behavioral therapy, which is DBT. And it really focuses on how your brain takes in information through thinking, feeling, how you learn best, and connecting that to actions.
All right. So there is a certain pattern, there's a certain approach based on the individual preferences that you tailor your program or your coaching style to help those individuals out.
Absolutely. There's about 10 they break them down into about 10 areas of executive functioning. And I've covered several just in chatting with you about organization and planning, but also behavioral control comes into it. Think of an adult going down the highway and being very upset about something that happened at work and getting cut off in traffic. And all of a sudden that anger is projected at the road rage or the individual that cut them off, when in fact, if we trace it back, it's something that happened at work. And it's controlling your behavior in that moment and really being mindful about where your thoughts are taking you. So That's an example as an adult, but think about that as a pattern that develops as a child over time. Frustrated with a grade, right? Frustrated with a friend group or not being included in something. Those behaviors continue to move forward and develop and strengthen over time unless somebody like myself steps in and says, let me present options to you about different ways of thinking and coping and strategizing in order to reach your goals, make you feel better, right? And get your work done.
I read about this Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is IDEA, and also the development of IEPs or 504 plans. Could you talk a little bit about these availability for those who are looking to gain some kind of perspective, some kind of understanding on what it is, how it works, that kind of thing?
That's perfect. That's a perfect question. That's how I got involved in coaching, was because as a special education teacher, I was in a classroom watching, children struggling that were already identified as having learning challenges. And oftentimes it wasn't necessarily a disability. It was a disability in that environment. So they go to different classes and if you think about students now, they have multiple teachers in a day. That's like having maybe 6 bosses in a day. Yeah. And having to adjust how they attend to that teacher, what that systems and organization look like for that classroom. So if a student doesn't function well in a classroom environment, in their learning environment, they're often identified as needing support and help, which comes in the lightest form is a 504, which you said that's a section of the Rehabilitation Act. And it's to help students have a little bit more support within school. So that could be extra time on a test. Or that could be gets to sit in the front of the room, like preferential seating. So they're paying attention to the teacher instead of their eyes wandering. A more supportive structure would be an IEP or an individualized education plan. And the school meets with the parents to decide whether a higher level of support and structure would be appropriate. So it may be less items on a test. Instead of having 4 math problems that test the same addition or multiplication, maybe 2 or 3. So you don't exhaust the brain in that moment, but you're still capturing relevant data to support the student knows, in fact, what they're doing, right? Or the concepts. It could actually be bigger print. It could be time to move around a classroom. If you think about what we allow children to do in a class, we make them sit down, pay attention. That's not required as an adult. We have the freedom to move around and to, take a little bit longer to, take in information. Life is strict in school. A well-organized classroom has expectations and structure. And oftentimes, if you don't conform to those structures as a student with a challenge, a learning challenge, these accommodations make it a little bit more manageable.
How do you keep yourself updated with the latest trend in this particular area?
I consider myself an education researcher.
Okay.
First and foremost. I'm a Fulbright scholar, and I worked with the Ministry of Education in Singapore because I was very interested in how students with learning challenges actualize into well-paying careers. And Singapore has shown that they're capable of doing that. So I did some research and then came back to the United States. My research is published and in a peer-reviewed journal. So I continually update what the world is doing globally to work with neurodivergent individuals as opposed to just my little corner of the world in California. So that being said, I attend and participate in education conferences, both nationally and internationally. Recently, I presented at the U.S. Department of State for the Global Teaching Dialogue, specifically on executive functioning and ADHD, which I'm talking with you about today.
I'm so glad that it happened in Singapore, and Singapore is leading it because it's also one of the Asian country there. So now that I can see there's some kind of like race, some kind of hope that's emerging for a country in that, they consider as a third world country, they can potentially do these kind of research, getting grants and stuff like that, so that they can also help those who are in need.
I think if you do some research on Singapore on international tests, both in math and reading and academics, they're one of the highest scoring nations in the world.
Oh, okay.
So they have some of the brightest students that are going through school and leaving well versed in math and, language arts and histories. And so picking them to do research in was a very calculated move on my part, because I wanted to study with the best and the brightest. What were they doing within their education system that was producing students that, had neurodivergence, that were able to, move into well-paying careers and really showcase their skills?
That's really, really great to hear that. I wasn't aware of that's happening in that. If I may ask you about this, there is, whenever we do a certain thing, there's some level of misconception that always gets brought in. What are some of the misconception families, or in your case, educators might have about this? We talk about this IEP 504 plans, or the support available for students with executive dysfunction, I would say.
One of the reasons I got into coaching as well was because initially when my son was diagnosed with ADHD, medication was one of the first things that was offered. Put your son on Ritalin, try Zoloft. What about Concerta? All this medication was kind of put at our feet and said, try these. And being an educator, I saw students that were on medication and were zombie-like in school. They were medicated out of their ADHD. What research has found that some of these, along with some negative behaviors of ADHD, there comes increased energy and resilience. And when these are leveraged, they are so powerful. And I wanted to teach my son coping strategies to deal with some of these behaviors and new strategies. So at his best, individuals with ADHD are amazing in a crisis. Right? They use free association to intuitively, reach new paradigms and to think outside the box, and to think of ADHD and as needing medication all the time. I think that's a misconception. I think it's helping individuals manage these behaviors. So I just wanted to add that, entrepreneurs, if we look at really successful entrepreneurs, I would say that the majority are coming to terms with it, the fact that they do have ADHD, and they're coming out in public forums saying that they have neurodivergency. And what research shows is that entrepreneurs are 3 times more likely to own businesses on their own, right? If you have ADHD, you're more likely to not like routine and go out on your own and be a risk taker to really make a difference.
Right. Dr. Christine, you talked about this individualism that exists in there in helping, because everybody's different, right? So when we talk about this anxiety effect in executive functioning, do you have certain strategies that can be used to help those students manage anxiety while improving their executive skills?
Sure. If we think about anxiety, it typically comes from the lack of control over knowing what's going to happen. So if in fact you are disorganized, or you lack planning, or you are anticipating what's happened, your brain is racing faster than, where you are at in the moment, those things are anxiety provoking. It actually is a symptom of not being able to handle your executive functioning. So helping individuals understand where they have their challenges in executive functioning, again, whether that's through organization or planning or emotional control, understanding how they learn, and being able to take accountability and responsibility for what's happening, that in fact relieves anxiety. So it's almost like back mapping in a way. It's helping them back map to find out where the anxiety is rooted and deal with the challenges that they're specifically having that will in fact relieve the anxiety, and hopefully it will diminish in the future.
Thank you so much for that information. Let's pivot a little bit about the coaching aspect of it. What are the essential qualities that you can think of for somebody who wants to become a coach and thrive in this coaching business?
Of course, I've seen a lot of ADHD coaches come up in my community, and I applaud them. I think parents right now, especially with the rise in diagnosis of ADHD, are helping other parents cope with some of the misconceptions we talked about, like medication is the first step, right? I'm not a fan of that, but really bringing it out to the forefront. It's not something we need to hide. So the attributes of a great coach would be empathy, firsthand experience, right? Being able to use personal stories to impart messages and possibly strategies that might be helpful, that might work in your home or your office or for you specifically. Research-based, I think that, operating just on emotion is possibly not the best way to be a coach. You need to have research behind you, backing up with the decisions and the strategies that you're making, and to be well informed.
In this coaching career, have you seen any kind of trend that, when people become a coach and later on they drop, something is not right? They did not feel that it is the right career for me. Have you noticed anything that's trending in that space?
I think imposter syndrome is a word that, when I first heard about it, I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
But not thinking that they have the experience or the relative information to share with other people. Mm-hmm. And that can be a self-limiting prophecy in itself, right? I just, I'm not that good. I don't have, the wherewithal or the knowledge to be a coach. If you help one family, one individual, then you in fact have been successful in your coaching. To keep it, right, to keep the momentum behind it, I think is getting in front of those groups that want to hear your message, whether it's parent groups, whether it's executives who are having trouble with executive functioning, finding yourself at conferences, not just to hear what's being said, but also to meet and greet and network.
What advice you have for those who just started their career?
Be informed. There are many laws that are grounded in ADHD, especially for students. Like you cited, IDEA, with IEPs, that's the Individuals with Education Act, IEPs, 504s. So there's a lot of litigation and expertise that's needed to connect school with student learning. When we move into the adult field, it's a little bit of a different dynamic where you need to understand business acumen, what that means to show up in a professional way, meet deadlines, and be able to meet your coaching clients where they're at in that moment. That's the individualized part.
As I came from information technology background, and since we're in this digital age, there are tons of tools that are available in the market these days. What are your thoughts on these tools in terms of getting some level of help utilizing those tools to help yourself as well as your students?
That's a perfect question because I recently started moving online. I see individuals digitally now in a virtual community. And what is so fascinating is because when you meet with somebody through in a virtual place where I meet my clients, I'm able to see their desktop, right? What that looks like, be able to see how they organize their information, if they're using any apps to help them manage their time. Are they navigating their digital calendars with ease and appropriately, like time blocking? It also provides the opportunity to understand the digital space, how often they're spending time on their phone. What are their common distractors, whether it's social media? So apps play both a positive and negative place within managing ADHD. They can be helpful, but they actually can be very take away focus and negative. So again, it's that individuality, taking technology and making it work for clients as opposed to saying all or none.
Thanks for sharing that. What advice you have for the educators who wanted to better support the neurodiverse students in their classrooms?
Well, as an educator, I know that individuals go into education because we love working with students. And I I love that light bulb moment when you can see that a child is learning something and now they're applying it, and now they're not just applying it, but they're building on it. So as an educator, when I go to education conferences and I talk to educators about what ADHD looks like and how to improve executive functioning within their classroom, one piece of advice that I would give, not just to educators, but to parents and individuals that have challenges with ADHD, is to get a hard copy calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Get a hard copy calendar, and at least for 2 to 3 weeks, write down what you do in a day, whether it's a month in advance or a week in advance. Catalog what you do in a day and what is taking up your time. Mm-hmm. So as a teacher, you're actually showing students what happens within a day. Like, it's beyond just the school day. And capturing time is one of the most important things for executive functioning training. Understanding what that looks like.
Yes, indeed. And as an educator as well as a researcher, you always have something going on. What's your next initiative?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, I'm writing a book.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it.
Let me know about the book once it gets published. I would like to have a copy of it, please.
Absolutely. It was really a toss-up between whether making it just for educators because that's different language that we use in a school system, whether it's, K through 12 school or even in college, or whether it's for individual families and parents. And I kind of moved towards the education part because I think education can be lifelong. And because I see individuals through school up through business, I think the strategies can be applied overall. So although I'm speaking to education professionals, I believe the takeaways and the strategies can be applied in daily life. I haven't come up with a title though, so I'll let you know when that happens.
Interesting. Yeah, we're connected anyways, so I'm keeping an eye on it, and I'm following you as well, so that I'm not going to miss that moment.
Great to hear.
We're coming towards the end, so is there anything else you'd like the listeners to know about your work? Awesome work, by the way, and your approach to empowering the group of neurodiverse learners?
I would just say that neurodiversity brings a holistic approach to whether it's meetings or communities or villages. It's great not to have groupthink, and people that think differently can add such a unique perspective. And without individuals with ADHD, we possibly wouldn't have, the amazing, the amazing moments in our time in respect to great advances. If we look at Elon Musk, and he's neurodivergent, right? And just where he's taken the world with his, SpaceX and Teslas and, thinking outside the box. So never think of ADHD as a disability. Think of it as something that you can refine and build on, that hopefully one day you can parlay into being an entrepreneur and reaching people and making a difference.
Thank you so much for that thought. Really, really appreciate your time today. You have a great day.
Great. It was great meeting with you.
That was Dr. Christine Powell in conversation with Pravin Sharma at Insight Ignite Coaching Voices podcast. You can contact Dr. Powell at dr.ccpowell@gmail.com. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Coaching Voices podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you valuable insights into the world of coaching and leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps others find the show and supports us in continuing to bring you inspiring content. Do not forget to share this episode with anyone you think might benefit from the discussion. And if you're looking to explore coaching further or have any questions, please feel free to connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing, keep leading, and stay curious.